Welcome to Talkin Sexes, where we break down gender, relationships, and society with a little bit of wit and a whole lot of real talk. I'm Jennifer Marie.
And I'm A. Pariera. We're here to tackle the questions everybody's asking, whether they admit it or not.
From love and dating to the unwritten rules of masculinity and femininity, no topic is off limits.
And just so we're clear, this isn't about us versus them. It's about how we all navigate the world through different perspectives.
So, whether you're a man, woman, or just trying to figure it all out, pull up a chair because we've got a lot to talk about.
Let's get into it.
Welcome to Talkin Sexes. This is our first episode, and A and I are both really excited to share it with you. First, I want to introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Marie.
Hi, everybody. I'm A. Pariera. Happy to be here with Jen.
First, we want to kind of tell you about a little bit about ourselves, about who we are and why we're here. Hey, everybody. I'm Jennifer Marie. I am a trans woman. I'm a 39-year-old trans woman from the Midwest, and I am a former financial professional and was in sports. When I came out, things got a little bit shook up, and I learned that I had a bigger purpose in this world. And my purpose was to help people understand the transgender experience, because this is something that I didn't understand myself. So I started a coaching business, and I started speaking and kind of just talking to a lot of people. And I'm using my platform to help people understand the transgender experience for themselves or for a loved one, to try and help them be able to have an understanding of this complicated thing. So I'm going to let A introduce himself now.
Hey, everybody. I'm A, and I am a trans man and entrepreneur. I'm a trans man who's come out twice in my life. A part of my journey had also been a 7-year period of detransitioning, which allowed me to explore the depths of like my inner world of mindset and just like that inner humanity that we all experience. And from my life experiences and human experiences, now I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a coach, I'm a social media consultant, I'm also a spouse, a parent. I do lots of things.
I wanted to share with you all why this podcast began. As most of my ideas that come to me, they just kind of come to me in like almost like this daydream. And I had this idea that I wanted to start a podcast. And I knew I didn't want it to be like all the other podcasts. I wanted it to be focused more on gender and gender norms and really just a lot more fun. So what came to me was this idea that trans people have this ability to look at the world from two sides, especially if they're willing to look back into their past. Because in my life, I have gone through and found these different times where I see the problem of like men are this way and women are this way. Well, what? And now that I've lived on both sides, I understand better and have this idea where I have thoughts on both sides and kind of try to kind of bridge that gap. So I wanted a podcast host that was also like me and that they're not torn from their past. You know, like my past doesn't really eat me up, whatever. My name will always be my former name. It's not my dead name. So I wanted someone that was like me in that way. And I saw some of A's content and I realized that A was the perfect choice for me. A has not only lived on both sides, but A has detransitioned for a little bit and just brings a whole other dynamic to this. And we are both really excited to be here and start talking to you about all of these amazing fun topics. And we're going to have a lot of freaking fun. I can tell you that. That's the number one thing. This episode is to kind of just set it all up. But make sure you stay tuned because it's going to get spicy. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of laughs. But that probably is coming on um, in later episodes. So stay tuned. So let's start with the big debate. Are gender roles wired into us, or did we just get assigned these rules at birth?
Honestly, this is such an interesting question because on the surface, it feels like an answer that should be obvious, right? Because of the narrative that we're given. Biology exists, hormones exist, testosterone, estrogen, physical strength, all of that is real, right? But if we take a step back and really look at who decided that these things meant man or woman, like, yeah, certain traits might show up more often in certain bodies, but that doesn't mean they should define what we're allowed to do. So think about we've been told how we should behave. We've been told who we should be. That part, the rules, the expectations, that's something that's been taught. That's something that has been installed into our minds from the time that we were born. It's like we've taken a few biological differences, but we've built an entire reality and story around them. One that tells people what they're supposed to do based on who based on how they're labeled at birth.
That's so interesting. But if they're learned, why do so many cultures reinforce those same rules? So let's get a little nerdy here for a little bit, right? When did all these expectations get set in stone? Hey, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, another great question and one that we can get really deep into. But I think it really just comes down to survival. If we go back in time, strength, reproduction were pretty key to keeping a group alive. We didn't have many resources that we do in this day and age that we are living now. So men who on average were physically stronger, they did what? They hunted, they protected us. While women who could carry the children, they focused on keeping them alive, doing the housework. That made sense back then. But the thing is, instead of evolving past those roles, society turned them into rules. And as time went on and as society developed, those rules got enforced by culture, religion, politics, you name it. It's everywhere. The more they repeated, the more they felt like truth in society. And here we are today, still carrying these same expectations, even though we live in a world where survival doesn't depend on them anymore. If gender roles were truly biological, if they were wired into us, why would it, why wouldn't, oh, we, if they were wired into us, we wouldn't see so much variation across history, right? But we do. There's been cultures with matriarchal societies, places that recognize the third and even multiple genders, and in entire communities where roles weren't based on gender at all. So maybe the real question isn't are gender roles natural, but who do they actually serve, and do they serve us?
That's really interesting. And I think it's important to point out that the gender roles that we're kind of living by right now kind of began in the Victorian era, where it was all about how it kind of started because men had to take on that hunter and gatherer role because their wives were staying home with the kids. And so all of this kind of in some ways stems from the idea that women have to give birth and someone needs to take care of the kids. And so it kind of just began that way where women just had to be doing this, so men were going to take over. So that's kind of where the patriarchal society kind of started. At least that's the way that I understand it.
Mhm.
But I think that was kind of important to know. When did we first notice gender expectations?
Want me to go first?
Yeah, why don't you take off first, and I'll kind of go next.
Okay, sounds good. When I first noticed gender expectations, I swear it's like 3 or 4 years old. You start to see where you belong in this world, or maybe where you feel different. Because when I was like 3 or 4, they're doing like the pink stuff, the blue stuff, the dresses, the suits, and all of the girls, including myself, had to wear dresses. But I didn't feel like that was right. I wanted to wear what the boys were wearing, but back then I didn't have language for what I was experiencing. I was just really confused. So that's when I first started to notice those expectations.
Interesting. Well, for me, like, I don't think I really had this big idea that I had these expectations. My family was pretty open. It seemed like, they weren't going to tell me that you can't play with that toy or whatever. I played with my sister. We played Barbies and things. For me, it was kind of more when it came to elementary school and things where the boys did this and the girls did this. And so I think for me, that was like when the world kind of tells around that 8-ish, 9-ish kind of period is when the world kind of tells you, hey, this is who you are. Like, and you can't do that anymore. Like, so that's kind of where it began for me. Hey, did you ever get in trouble for not acting like a girl?
No, thankfully, because I also was raised in a pretty open household and an open community, and the schools were pretty open as well. So I was allowed to express myself in the ways that I wanted to, but it didn't mean that inside it didn't feel wrong or off. Just because the outside world let me express it that way, I didn't always feel like, oh, this is the right thing to do because I saw the labels outside of us, boy, girl, and just because I was allowed to express myself, it didn't mean that I felt confident about it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah,
So I was never
absolutely.
like really shamed for it, but looking at societal message and like cultural messages, that's when I felt shame for it.
Okay. Yeah, because and that's one of the biggest factors is like the culture and the world wants to tell you these things. Maybe it's not your family. Um and yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting. For me, it was in this way, gender norms did come sooner because so when I was 4 years old, I went to grandma's house and tried on a Silk Peak Road nightgown. And presenting as a boy, everyone was always they thought it was kind of funny at first. I'd wear it around and play as we dressed and things. Um, but eventually I was told, you need to stop. It's not funny anymore. And that day I was crushed. That was a huge day in my life when I retreated and for the next 30 something years of my life, I allowed my life to just feel like it was about clothes and not about anything gender identity. Um, that was that's just what I did. And so I cross-dressed hundreds of times in my life. And I knew that I couldn't share those feelings with anyone because of all those gender norms. And I knew that everyone was going to say everything was wrong that I was feeling. So I just kept it to myself and until that time was right. We see women in CEO roles, dads staying home with kids, but some expectations are still stuck in the 1950s. Why do you think that is, eh?
I think, like I said, it's just like those repeated patterns from history that they just repeat themselves so much that they start to become our rules. They start to become so set in stone that people just believe they're absolute truths without even questioning it throughout their life. So it's like now in this day and age, you're born a assigned boy at birth and you're given this label and you're expected to show up this one way throughout your entire life because that label was thrown at you. And it's just a matter of you never took the time to question if this label even matches how you feel or experience the world on the inside. So I think it's a lack of self-reflection in the world, and I think it's a lack of self-identity.
A lack of self reflection is exactly right. I think that everyone has gone through that time in their life when there's things they should have been thinking or reflecting back on, and they just the world tells you this, so you just go with it. And I think that's even what's happening even with we don't get really too political on this show, but even with transgender um, politics, is people are just being told something and they're just believing it.
Mhm.
And to be honest, I'm different. I was like those people. I was out there judging LGBT people because my church told me to, and it wasn't. And I didn't ever do that research until I realized who I was. So it's easy to the easy way is to just accept what you're being told, and by the government or whoever it is. That's the easiest thing. It takes the real work comes when you actually go in and dive into it and think for yourself
Mhm.
and reflect about what you believe. And so I think that even happens even within ourselves. Like I wasn't reflecting about what it was, about who I was, why I was. It was the world is this way. Okay. That's the easy thing to do. I can try and fit into this guy mold. That's what I try to do. Didn't work very well. I don't know about you, but mine didn't work very well.
It worked while it did, and then it didn't work when it didn't.
Right? Absolutely. Love it. All right. So I kind of want to touch base on some of the things that have shifted and then kind of talk about some of the things that are still rigid. Education. Women didn't really used to be very educated. Men didn't want them to be educated. And and so as women have become more educated, that has really opened up things for a lot of growth and a lot of growth within gender roles. Sexual and reproductive rights, paid work, allowing women to be paid and the more and more that they get accurately paid for the work that they do, that really pushes the gender roles forward as well. And then the political voice and the representation, like women's right to vote, that has really helped things along with gender roles changing. And as you can see in politics nowadays, there's a lot of these things that are being talked about. These exact things we've kind of just talked about, reproductive rights and all of this stuff. It is because people are trying to force people back into these old gender roles that they liked, and um, it's mostly men. So I don't know. Do you have any takes on any of that? Eh?
No, I think that all sounds right and accurate for the things that have definitely shifted. And yeah, seeing more representation on the media of women and stuff like that. And yeah, I agree. Like, I think it's just trying to push back people into roles that we've all evolved from and outgrown, right? Like,
Right?
gender is self-expression. Like, it's how you want to express yourself. So, to get this far in the world and to say, no, you have to go back into these roles is throwing everybody for a loop right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you want to talk about kind of some of the things that are a little bit more rigid?
Yeah. So like the things I feel like it's actually interesting when we talk about the things that are still more rigid, it's more in those like personality things and like the way we think and the how we feel. So like assuming women will do all of the cleaning, cooking, or like admin tasks at work or community events, viewing men as the primary breadwinners and women as the primary like housekeeper and child caregivers, thinking men are naturally more violent and driven by uncontrollable sexual urges, and the list goes on. But I think that's really where we still live in a very rigid world when it comes to gender.
Yeah, we really do. Really do. There's some things may never change. And A and I are not here to tear down everything. Let's make that clear. This is not an anarchy kind of a show here, all right? We believe there is some validity to some of these gender roles. And so we're not just gonna just tear everything apart every time. Honestly, we'll probably in a lot of ways tear it apart and rebuild it back together. That's maybe a better way of saying it. How do gender roles show up in dating, work, family, and everyday life? I think it's important to kind of, as we talk about here, about how do these actually just show up in our lives? Like uh, for dating, I think a good example is why is he expected to pay for dinner? Like men are always expected to pay for dinner. And to be honest, as a woman, I do expect it. And I know as a trans woman that I I should be opening my mind up more and like and feeling like, oh, we could go Dutch on dinner or whatever. But there is this like this ingrained in me that I do want a man to pay for my dinner. And and I don't know if and I don't know if that is just because of gender roles or and we may even get into this in another episode at some point, but I also realized how much freaking money, time, and work goes into making all of this happen that we do a lot of times for men. And and so that I feel like that, yeah, he should buy my dinner, Like, I mean, I spend a lot of money on all this, he can if he wants to take me to dinner, then he can buy it.
Mhm.
So
It's so interesting, huh? Once you start to
uh,
think about it. And
uh-huh.
experiencing one world before and then going into the next world, it's so
Yes.
fascinating.
But before, on the other side, I used to think, oh my gosh, wh why are men always expected to pay for dinner? Like this is the worst. So
So funny. And then when
that just gives you probably a teaser kind of like the kind of fun that we're gonna have on this show.
exactly. Those are the questions we'll be diving into. And then when it comes to like the workplace, you think about men and when they're using their voice, they get to be called assertive. But then when women use their voice, they're called bossy, right? Like, why do
Right.
we think that way? They're expressing themselves almost in very similar ways, but getting different labels because of their gender.
Absolutely. And the thing this what this really brings up for me was in my past, I have gone back and forth from left to right, politically and all of it, back and forth multiple times, to be honest. And it makes me think about Hillary Clinton and how I was against Hillary Clinton and Hillary because Hillary Clinton was a strong woman and I've in going to this side, I've realized, wow, that was my reason was because she was strong because because it sounds like she's bossy kind of in like as A's just mentioning like no she was assertive and she's a power woman does not mean that make her any less of a woman or really shouldn't be intimidating, you wouldn't be intimidated if a man did that. So yeah.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to the family, like why why is it always the women that are expected to do all of this work? But I know people in my life that men never changed a diaper, and it was actually completely shocking to me. And I mean, I've always been very different. I've always been very hands-on. Even when I was living as a man, I was I always wanted kids, even since I was a kid. I I knew that things were going to just be different for me in that way. And so I was going to help out. I did most of the work, honestly. I did 70% of the work in my house myself. And and I didn't really even complain about it too much, I love being part of raising kids. But when men take care of kids, it's like, well, it's kind of it's a dad job, like you're helping out here. This is great. But it's not just parenting, like there shouldn't be these two specific roles within parenting. Parents should be co-parents, in my opinion.
I agree.
That's one thing that we wanted to kind of touch on too is like that A and I are both parents ourselves, and so we both bring that to the table as well. My kids are 7 and 9, And yours is what, A?
She's 5, almost 6.
Awesome. So are gender roles just outdated labels we should ditch, or do they actually help us navigate life?
I really, really do feel like it's a mix of both. Like gender roles have been around forever, and in some ways, they've helped society function. I see gender personally as an internal compass. It's a self-identified part of who we are. So your authentic, self-identified gender helps guide you in understanding who you are, what you want, and how you move through life. The problem isn't that gender labels exist so much, I think. It's that we've been taught it has to look a certain way. But what if instead of sticking to traditional roles, we maybe allowed gender to be more fluid, personal, and chosen? So, like, if a woman wants to pay for the meal, great, she could do that. So, when we're allowed to explore ourselves in those ways, like that example I just briefly mentioned, we're allowed to define it for ourselves. And that's when gender really becomes meaningful and helps us navigate the world around us.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, I think gender is really the problem is the fact that everything is just so rigid, and we need to let people kind of choose things. Let people dictate it instead of just this is the way things are, or this is how we've always done it. Like, just think about anything. Just because that's how we've always done it, does that mean it's the best way? And when I think about this question myself, I do I think gender roles are just outdated, and gender roles don't mean anything. And I can never throw them out the window myself, because if gender roles didn't mean anything, I wouldn't have transitioned. I need that gender role because I am a woman, and I need to and want to live as a woman. And for me, that was part of my journey. And so I'm not going to just throw all this out the window and say that it doesn't mean anything, because it does to me. So at the end of the day, do gender roles make sense? Or are they just rules we follow because we were told to? We're going to get more and more into all of this through our fun conversations that A and I are going to have over the course of many, many, many new episodes.
And we want to hear from you. What's a gender role you've never questioned until recently, or maybe until this episode? Drop us a message and we'll read some of your answers in a future episode.
Oh, and next time, we're getting straight into it. Why do men prioritize sex over emotional intimacy? You do not want to miss this one.
And trust us, we really are just getting started. Each week, we're tackling a big, juicy gender question. Like, why do men not listen to women when they talk?
And why does my guy get so freaked out when I don't orgasm during sex? We're going to unpack all of it. So stay tuned. That's a wrap for this episode of Talkin' Sexes. If you love the conversation, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next.
And we want to hear from you. Got a burning question or a hot topic you want us to tackle? Go to the SpeakPipe link in the show notes and leave us a message on our answering machine.
Who knows? Your question might just be the next big debate.
And before we go, a quick disclaimer. We're both entrepreneurs, but we're not here in a professional capacity. Everything that we share is based on our experiences and opinions, not professional advice. And as trans people, we want to be clear. We do not speak for the entire community. Everyone's journey is different and everyone is valid.
So take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and keep the conversation going.
Until next time, keep talking, keep questioning,
and keep breaking the rules.